He thought he could buy her humiliation for the price of a vintage bottle of champagne. Sebastian Alistair, New York's most ruthless billionaire, didn't just see a waitress when he looked at Harper. He saw a target for his amusement. With a cruel smirk, he threw $10,000 on the marble floor and dared the clumsy servant to dance, expecting her to trip and entertain his wealthy friends. But Sebastian made a fatal miscalculation. He didn't know that the girl holding the tray wasn't just a waitress. She was a legend in hiding. And when the music started, the predator became the prey. This is the story of how one dance destroyed an ego and revealed a secret that shocked the elite. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel on Fifth Avenue smelled of old money, expensive perfume, and the distinct metallic scent of judgment. It was the night of the Sapphire Gala, the most exclusive event on the Manhattan social calendar, where tickets cost more than most people earned in a year. For Harper Evans, the night didn't represent glamour. It represented rent. "Keep your eyes down, Harper. Move fast. Stay invisible," her manager, Mr. Henderson, hissed as he adjusted his bow tie near the service entrance. "Tonight is about perfection. Sebastian Alistair is at table 1. If his water glass drops below half full, you're fired. Do you understand?" Harper nodded, tightening the apron around her waist. Her feet already ached in the sensible black flats required by the staffing agency. At 24, Harper had learned that life rarely gave you second chances. Once, she had worn silk and satin. Now, she wore a polyester uniform that scratched her skin. "I understand, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice steady. She pushed through the swinging doors, balancing a heavy tray of crystal flutes filled with Dom Perignon. The noise of the room hit her like a physical wave, a cacophony of polite laughter, the clinking of silverware, and a live orchestra playing a dull background waltz. She moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency. To the guests, she was part of the furniture. A ghost. They didn't see the high cheekbones or the striking green eyes hidden behind her messy bun and thick-rimmed glasses. They only saw the tray. As she approached table 1, the atmosphere changed. The air felt colder, sharper. Sebastian Alistair sat at the head of the table like a king holding court. He was undeniably handsome, with sharp features, hair the color of midnight, and eyes that looked like shattered ice. At 32, he was the CEO of Alistair Holdings, a man known for hostile takeovers and an even more hostile personality. He was currently ignoring the beautiful woman in the red dress clinging to his arm, Isabella Vance, a socialite known more for her Instagram following than her kindness. "This bore is intolerable," Sebastian muttered, swirling his scotch. "Why does charity have to be so tedious?" "Because it looks good for the press, darling," Isabella purred, tracing the rim of her glass. "Speaking of tedious, look at the service. I've been waiting for a refill for a whole minute." Harper stepped forward instantly. "Apologies, ma'am." She reached out to pour the champagne. At that exact moment, Sebastian shifted abruptly to laugh at a joke from the man across from him. His elbow knocked hard against Harper's arm. The bottle slipped. It didn't shatter, but a splash of golden liquid flew out, landing squarely on Sebastian's immaculate bespoke tuxedo jacket. The music didn't stop, but the silence at table 1 was deafening. Harper froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Sir, I am so sorry. Let me—" She reached for a napkin. Sebastian stood up slowly. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. That would have been better. Instead, he looked at the wet spot on his lapel, then slowly lifted his gaze to Harper. He looked at her, as if she were a stain on the floor that the janitor had missed. "Do not touch me," he said, his voice low and smooth, carrying a menace that made the hair on Harper's arms stand up. "It was an accident, sir. I bumped you." Sebastian let out a dry, cruel chuckle. He turned to the table. "Did you hear that? The help is blaming me for her incompetence." Isabella giggled cruelly. "Clumsy thing. She probably expects a tip for ruining a $5,000 jacket." Mr. Henderson appeared out of thin air, looking pale. "Mr. Alistair, I apologize profusely. She's new. She's leaving right now." He grabbed Harper's arm, his grip bruising. "Wait," Sebastian said. He held up a hand. He looked Harper up and down, his eyes narrowing. He saw the fraying hem of her uniform, the scuffed shoes, the way her hands trembled slightly. He saw weakness, and Sebastian Alistair loved to exploit weakness. "Leaving is too easy," Sebastian drawled. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick money clip. He peeled off a stack of crisp $100 bills. He dropped them, one by one, onto the polished floor at Harper's feet. 1,000, 2,000, 5. The table watched in fascination. "Pick it up," Sebastian commanded. Harper stared at him, her chin lifting slightly. "I'm not a beggar, sir." "No, you're a waitress who just ruined my evening," Sebastian sneered. "But I'm a generous man. I'll make you a deal. I'm bored. The band is playing a waltz. I bet you've never stepped foot on a dance floor in your life, have you? You look like you trip over your own shadow." He gestured to the empty space in the center of the room. "Dance!" Sebastian dared her, his voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "Give us a show. If you can move across that floor without looking like a dying pigeon, the money is yours. If not, you leave this city and never work in a high-end venue again." The humiliation burned Harper's cheeks, but it wasn't the heat of shame. It was the heat of anger. Isabella leaned in, whispering loud enough for Harper to hear. "Look at her shoes. She probably doesn't even know the count of a waltz. This will be hilarious." Mr. Henderson whispered frantically, "Harper, apologize and walk away. Don't make a scene. You're fired anyway." Harper looked at the money on the floor. $5,000. That was her grandmother's medication for 3 months. That was the deposit for a decent apartment. But more than that, she looked at Sebastian's smirk. It was the smirk of a man who had never been told no, a man who thought the world was his playground and people like her were just NPCs in his game. He thought she was nobody. He didn't know that 5 years ago, before the accident that took her parents and the debt that swallowed her inheritance, Harper Evans had been the youngest soloist at the Royal Ballet Academy in London. He didn't know that she had been trained by the legendary Madame Dubois. She hadn't danced in 4 years. She had buried that part of herself when she had to start scrubbing floors to survive. But looking at Sebastian Alistair, something inside the coffin of her past kicked open the lid. Harper bent down. The room gasped. Was she going to pick up the money? She reached past the bills and picked up the linen napkin she had dropped. She folded it neatly and placed it on the table. Then she stood up to her full height. She reached up and pulled the pins from her hair. Her dark chestnut locks cascaded down her back in a heavy wave. She took off her thick glasses and set them on the tray. Without the frames, her eyes were piercing, intelligent, and blazing with a fire that startled Sebastian. "Keep your money, Mr. Alistair," Harper said, her voice projecting with a clarity that silenced the table. "But if I dance, and I don't trip, you apologize. Publicly. To me, and to the staff you treat like dirt." Sebastian blinked. The mouse had roared. He smirked, amused. "Deal, but be warned, sweetheart. The floor is slippery." He waved a hand at the orchestra conductor, who had paused, watching the drama unfold. Maestro, a waltz, something challenging. The Blue Danube. The conductor hesitated, then raised his baton. The crowd parted. The guests in their tuxedos and gowns formed a circle, whispering. They were expecting a train wreck. They were expecting a clumsy waitress to shuffle awkwardly and run away crying. Phones were raised to record the embarrassment. Harper stepped away from the table. She walked toward the center of the floor. She didn't walk like a waitress anymore. Her posture shifted, her spine elongated, her shoulders dropped, her neck lengthened. Even in the cheap, flat shoes, her gait became fluid, almost predatory. She stopped in the center of the spotlight. She closed her eyes for a second, inhaling the scent of the room. For a moment, she wasn't Harper, the struggling waitress. She was the phoenix. The music began, the famous swelling strings of Strauss's Blue Danube. For the first 4 bars, Harper stood perfectly still. The crowd murmured, "She's frozen." Isabella laughed. "Oh, this is pathetic." Then, on the 5th beat, Harper moved. It wasn't a hesitation. It was an explosion of grace. She didn't have a partner, so she danced with the air, with the music itself. She extended her right arm, her fingers curving with a delicacy that made the heavy air seem like water. She stepped into a promenade, her footwork so light she seemed to hover millimeters above the parquet floor. The transformation was visceral. The cheap black uniform suddenly looked like a costume designed for minimalism. As she spun, the fabric flared. She executed a chassé into a tour jeté. It was a move that required immense core strength and balance, usually impossible without warmed-up muscles and ballet slippers. Harper nailed it. She landed softly, silently, and flowed immediately into a series of rapid chain turns. The whispers in the room died instantly. Sebastian, who had been leaning back in his chair with a mocking grin, slowly straightened up. His drink was forgotten in his hand. He watched her lines, the perfect extension of her leg, the arch of her back, the way she held her head high, regal and defiant. This wasn't amateur hour. This was professional, world class. Harper spun faster. She was channeling every frustration, every unpaid bill, every rude customer, and every ounce of grief into the movement. She was dancing the story of her struggle. She swept across the floor, her eyes locking with Sebastian's as she passed his table. There was no fear in them, only triumph. The orchestra conductor, realizing what he was witnessing, picked up the tempo. He saw the talent. He drove the orchestra to match her energy. The music swelled, filling the cavernous room. Harper didn't just waltz. She combined contemporary ballet with the structure of the ballroom. She leapt, a grand jeté that seemed to defy gravity, her legs splitting in a perfect 180-degree angle mid-air. A collective gasp went through the room. "Who is she?" someone whispered loudly. "That's not a waitress," another murmured. Isn't that Harper Evans, the prodigy who vanished?" Sebastian heard the name. Harper Evans. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He remembered the headlines from years ago. The daughter of the Evans shipping dynasty that had collapsed overnight. The girl who was supposed to be the next Margot Fontaine before tragedy struck. He had just tried to bribe a prima ballerina to hop for his amusement. Harper was nearing the finale. Her chest was heaving, sweat glistening on her forehead. But her smile was genuine now. She wasn't dancing for him anymore. She was remembering who she was. With a final, dizzying pirouette, she stopped exactly on the final crashing note of the music. She held the pose, chin up, arms extended, fingers splayed, for 3 heartbeats. Silence hung in the air for a second. Then the applause started. It wasn't polite golf claps. It began with the conductor tapping his baton against his stand, and then the room erupted. People stood up. The wealthy elite, usually so reserved, were cheering. They loved a spectacle, and she had given them a miracle. Harper dropped her pose. The magic faded, and the exhaustion hit her. She smoothed her apron, pushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear, and turned to table 1. She walked back to Sebastian, who was standing now, his face pale, his arrogance stripped away, leaving only shock. Harper stopped 2 feet from him. She didn't look down. "Your turn, Mr. Alistair," she said, her voice breathless but steady. "Apologize." The silence that followed Harper's demand for an apology was heavier than the crystal chandelier hanging above them. Sebastian Alistair stood there, his jaw clenched, the ghost of the music still echoing in his mind. For the first time in his life, he felt small. The woman in the polyester uniform, smelling faintly of dish soap and sweat, loomed over him like a queen judging a peasant. He opened his mouth, the word sorry forming on his tongue, alien and heavy. But before he could speak, Isabella Vance laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound that cut through the tension like a knife. She stood up, smoothing her red silk dress, and stepped between Sebastian and Harper, reclaiming her territory. "Oh, bravo," Isabella sneered, clapping her hands slowly. "A truly moving performance. I didn't know the staffing agency hired circus acts. Tell me, honey, did you learn those moves stripping at a downtown club? Or is that just how you beg for tips?" The insult was so crude, so unnecessary, that several guests nearby gasped. Harper didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on Sebastian, waiting for him to be a man. Sebastian frowned at Isabella. "Isabella, that's enough." "Is it?" Isabella turned on him, her eyes flashing with jealousy. She had seen the way Sebastian looked at the waitress, with a hunger and respect he had never shown her. "She's a servant, Sebastian. She threw champagne on you, humiliated you, and now she's demanding an apology? Are you going to let the help speak to you like that?" The moment hung in the balance. Sebastian looked at Harper. He saw the pride in her green eyes. He knew he should apologize. He knew he had been cruel. But he was Sebastian Alistair, and the entire room, his investors, his rivals, the press, was watching. His ego, a beast he had fed for 30 years, roared to life. He stiffened. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the cold, iron mask of the billionaire CEO. "You have your money's worth of attention," Sebastian said coldly, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "I suggest you return to the kitchen before you embarrass yourself further." Harper's face didn't crumble. It hardened. The tiny flicker of hope that the rich man might have a soul was extinguished. "I don't need your permission to leave," Harper said softly. "And I don't need this job that badly." "You certainly don't have this job anymore." The shout came from Mr. Henderson, the manager, who came rushing forward, sweating profusely. He looked terrified of losing the Alistair account. He grabbed Harper by the shoulder, spinning her around. "You are fired! Get out! Immediately!" Henderson screamed, playing to the crowd. "I apologize, Mr. Alistair. She is unstable. I will see to it. She is blacklisted from every agency in New York." Harper shook off his hand. "Don't touch me." She reached up and unpinned the small name tag from her apron. She looked at it for a second. Harper, trainee, and then tossed it onto the table, right next to Sebastian's unfinished scotch. "Keep the change," she said to Sebastian. She turned and walked away. The crowd parted for her, not out of scorn this time, but out of a confused awe. She walked with her head high, the adrenaline fading, replaced by the crushing reality of what had just happened. She had won the moral victory, but she had lost her livelihood. As the kitchen door swung shut behind her, the ballroom slowly returned to its chatter. Sebastian stared at the plastic names tag on the table. He felt a strange tightening in his chest, a sensation he couldn't identify. He looked down at the floor. She had left her glasses. They were cheap, thick-framed plastic things lying on her serving tray. He reached out and picked them up. They were warm. "Come on, darling," Isabella said, tugging his arm, her voice sickly sweet again. "Let's dance. Show everyone who really owns this room." Sebastian pulled his arm away. The touch of her silk felt repulsively slippery compared to the raw fire he had just witnessed. "I'm leaving," Sebastian muttered. "What?" "But the auction hasn't started." "I said I'm leaving." Sebastian shoved the cheap glasses into his tuxedo pocket, turned his back on the gala, and walked out, leaving Isabella standing alone with her mouth open. The next morning, the headache Sebastian woke up with had nothing to do with alcohol. He sat in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, the morning sun gleaming off the glass and steel of the city he practically owned. On the mahogany desk in front of him lay two items: the cheap pair of glasses and a tablet playing a video on a loop. The video was titled, "The Cinderella of Fifth Avenue. Waitress destroys arrogant billionaire with dance." Someone had recorded it. Of course they had. It had 4 million views in 8 hours. In the video, the pixelated figure of Harper spun with impossible grace. You couldn't see her face clearly, but you could feel the emotion. And you could clearly see Sebastian sitting there, looking like a stunned statue. The comments were brutal. User NYC native. "That's Sebastian Alistair. Guy is a shark. Glad someone finally humbled him." Ballerina girl. "That technique is perfect. That's not a waitress. Who is she?" Eat the rich. "Look at him trying to buy her dignity. Disgusting. She's a queen." Sebastian swiped the tablet off his desk, sending it clattering onto the floor. He stood up and paced the room. He couldn't focus on the merger with Tanaka Corp. He couldn't focus on the stock prices. All he could see were those green eyes blazing with defiance. "Marcus," he barked. His personal assistant, a young man who looked perpetually tired, rushed in. "Yes, Mr. Alistair." "The girl," Sebastian said, staring out the window. "The waitress from the Pierre. Who is she?" Marcus hesitated. "Sir, social media has identified her. Her name is Harper Evans." Sebastian froze. He turned slowly. "Evans?" "Yes, sir. Does the name ring a bell?" "Get me the file on Evans Industries, the bankruptcy case from 4 years ago." Marcus blinked, surprised by the pivot. "The shipping company?" "Sir, we acquired their assets for pennies on the dollar after the accident." "Get the file." 10 minutes later, Sebastian was reading a document that made his blood run cold. Evans Industries had been a family legacy. 4 years ago, the CEO, Robert Evans, and his wife died in a car crash. Their daughter, Harper Evans, was 20 at the time. She was studying at the Royal Ballet in London. The file detailed what happened next. The company was leveraged. The bank called in the loans immediately upon the father's death. Predatory investors circled, and the shark that took the biggest bite, the one that forced the liquidation of the family home, the seizures of their accounts, and left the heiress with nothing but debt, was Alistair Holdings. Sebastian looked at the signature on the acquisition order. It was his father's signature. But Sebastian had been the one to execute the strategy. He had been the one who told the board, "They are weak. Crush them and take the fleet." He hadn't known about the daughter. He never looked at the people, only the numbers. He looked at the photo attached to the file. A younger Harper, wearing a tutu, smiling next to her parents. She looked happy, radiant. He had destroyed her life, He had taken her future, her home, and her art. And last night, he had thrown money at her feet and treated her like a beggar, not realizing he was the reason she was poor. A wave of nausea hit him. It wasn't just guilt. It was horror. "Where is she now?" Sebastian asked, his voice hoarse. "Mr. Henderson at the Pierre fired her last night," Marcus said, looking at his phone. "But I did some digging. She volunteers on Saturday mornings at a community center in the Bronx, the Hope for Youth Center. It's not a good neighborhood, sir." Sebastian grabbed his jacket. "Call the driver." "Sir, you have a meeting with the Japanese delegation in 20 minutes. "Cancel it." "But cancel everything, Marcus," Sebastian roared, grabbing the cheap glasses from his desk. "I have to return something." The drive to the Bronx took 40 minutes, transitioning from the manicured avenues of Manhattan to streets lined with graffiti, potholed roads, and grey concrete buildings. Sebastian's Rolls-Royce Phantom stuck out like a diamond in a gutter. People stopped on the sidewalk to stare as the sleek black car rolled to a halt in front of a dilapidated brick building with a faded sign, Hope for Youth Community Center. Sebastian told his driver to wait. He stepped out, feeling the grit of the city under his Italian leather shoes. He pushed open the heavy metal door. The inside smelled of old gym mats and bleach. He heard music. Not a live orchestra, but a tinny, scratchy classical piano coming from a boom box. He followed the sound down a hallway to a gymnasium. He stood in the doorway, hidden by the shadows. Harper was there. She wasn't wearing a uniform or a ball gown. She was wearing grey sweatpants and a tight tank top that showed the definition of her muscles. Her hair was in a messy bun. She wasn't dancing alone. She was surrounded by 20 little girls, ranging from 5 to 10 years old. Most of them were wearing mismatched socks. Some didn't even have ballet slippers. They looked like they came from struggling families, just like the neighborhood. "Chin up, distinct lines," Harper called out, her voice warm and encouraging. She adjusted the arm of a tiny girl with braided hair. "Imagine you are a princess. No, even better. Imagine you are a warrior. Ballet is about strength, not just being pretty." Again, plie. Sebastian watched, mesmerized. Last night she had been a fierce goddess. Today she was a nurturer. Despite everything he had taken from her, she was still giving. She was giving this art, this discipline, to children who couldn't afford it. He felt a lump in his throat. He tightened his grip on the plastic glasses in his pocket. He stepped into the light. The music stopped. One of the little girls pointed. "Miss Harper, there's a man in a suit." Harper spun around. When she saw him, the warmth vanished from her face instantly. It was replaced by a cold, defensive wall. She signaled the other instructor, an older woman near the boombox. "Mrs. Higgins, take the girls to the break room for water, please," Harper said calmly. "But Harper—" "Please." The room cleared out quickly, the children glancing back curiously at the tall, dark stranger. When they were alone, the silence in the gym was heavy. "Did you come to buy the building?" Harper asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or did you just come to make sure I was properly fired? Because if so, mission accomplished. Henderson blacklisted me this morning." Sebastian walked forward slowly. He felt stripped of his usual weapons. Money wouldn't work here. Intimidation wouldn't work. "I didn't come to fire you," Sebastian said. He pulled his hand out of his pocket and held out the glasses. "You left these." Harper looked at the glasses, then at him. She didn't move to take them. "You came all the way to the Bronx to return a pair of $10 pharmacy glasses?" she asked incredulously. "You could have mailed them or thrown them in the trash, which is where you think I belong." "I don't think that," Sebastian said. "Not anymore." He placed the glasses on a bench near him. "I saw the video, Harper. Good for you. I haven't watched it. I'm too busy looking for a job so I don't starve. I know who you are, Sebastian said quietly. I know about Evans Industries. Harper flinched. It was a microscopic movement, but he saw it. Her face paled. So you did your research. What do you want? A round of applause for ruining my father? I didn't know, Sebastian lied. Or at least he tried to convince himself it was the truth. I didn't know it was you. Does it matter? Harper stepped closer, her anger flaring. You and your company are vultures. You pick the bones of people who are grieving. My parents weren't even cold in the ground before your lawyers came for the house. I had to sell my piano. I had to sell my point shoes. I had to drop out of the academy. She poked him in the chest. It was a light touch, but it burned him. You think because you saw me dance once, you understand me? You don't know anything about survival, Sebastian. You play with lives like they're poker chips. I want to fix it, Sebastian blurted out. Harper laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Fix it? How? Are you going to bring my parents back? Are you going to give me back the last 4 years of my life? I can give you a job, Sebastian offered, realizing how hollow it sounded as soon as he said it. A real job. Not as a waitress. You could run a studio. I could fund this place. I could... Stop. Harper held up a hand. Just stop. I don't want your charity, and I definitely don't want your money, because it's blood money. It came from families like mine. She walked to the door of the gym and held it open. Get out, Mr. Alistair. You're trespassing. Sebastian looked at her. She was shaking, holding back tears of rage. He realized that for the first time in his life, he couldn't negotiate a win. He had lost. I am sorry, he said, and this time he meant it. About the gala, and about everything else. He walked past her. As he reached the door, he stopped. This isn't over, Harper. I owe a debt, and I always pay my debts. Consider it cancelled, she snapped. I just want you to leave me alone. Sebastian walked out into the grey daylight of the Bronx. He got into his car, but as the driver pulled away, he didn't look at his phone. He looked at the brick building disappearing in the rearview mirror. He wasn't going to leave her alone. He couldn't. Because for the first time in 10 years, Sebastian Alistair felt something other than greed. He felt a challenge, and he felt a desperate, burning need to see that fire in her eyes again, not directed at him in hate, but in something else. But he had a problem. He had an enemy, closer than he thought. Back at the Pierre Hotel, Isabella Vance was currently watching the same viral video on her phone, but she wasn't reading the comments. She was zooming in on Harper's face. She made a call. Hello? Waitskin Private Investigations? Yes. I need dirt. Everything you can find on a girl named Harper Evans. I don't care what it costs. I want her destroyed. Isabella hung up, smiling cruelly. Nobody humiliates me, she whispered to the empty room. Nobody. 2 weeks had passed since the incident in the Bronx. For Harper, they were the longest 2 weeks of her life. Sebastian's visit had rattled her, but reality was hitting harder. The black list Mr. Henderson had threatened her with was real. Every catering company, every high-end restaurant, and even the local diners seemed to have her name flagged. We aren't hiring, they would say, eyes shifting away nervously. But the final blow came on a rainy Tuesday. Harper arrived at the Hope for Youth Center to find the doors padlocked. A bright orange notice was plastered to the metal. Foreclosure. Property seized. No, Harper whispered, dropping her umbrella. No. Mrs. Higgins was standing there, weeping, holding a box of the children's drawings. They sold the building, Harper. A new holding company bought the debt yesterday. They want to turn it into luxury condos. We have 24 hours to vacate. Harper grabbed the notice. The holding company was listed as V Corp Realty. Vance. A cold fury, sharper than anything she had felt at the gala, pierced her chest. This wasn't Sebastian. This was Isabella. The woman wasn't satisfied with getting Harper fired. She wanted to destroy the one safe haven Harper had left for those kids. Harper's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hello? I heard about the community center. Tragically sad. Isabella's voice was like silk wrapped around a razor blade. You bought it, Harper said, her hand shaking. You bought the building just to hurt me. I bought it because it's prime real estate, darling. But I'm a reasonable woman. I'm hosting a charity masquerade tonight at the Metropolitan Museum. If you come, and if you're willing to make a public apology to me for your behavior at the Pierre, we might discuss a lease extension for your little urchins. You want me to beg? I want you to know your place. The Met 8:00 p.m. Don't be late. And wear something appropriate, if you can afford it. Harper hung up. She knew it was a trap. Every instinct screamed that walking into Isabella's den was suicide. But then she looked at Mrs. Higgins, and she thought of the little girls who practiced plies in their socks, because it was the only place they felt safe. Harper went home. She didn't have a gown. She went to her closet and pulled out the only thing remaining from her old life, a vintage black velvet dress that had belonged to her mother. It was simple, elegant, and timeless. She pinned her hair up, applied dark lipstick, and put on the masquerade mask she had made for a recital years ago. She wasn't going to beg. She was going to fight. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed into a wonderland of lights and flowers. The city's elite were there, hiding behind feathered and jeweled masks. Harper moved through the crowd, her head high, ignoring the whispers. She found Isabella near the Temple of Denda. Isabella was wearing a gold mask and a dress that cost more than the community center's annual budget. She was surrounded by a sycophantic entourage. I'm here, Harper said, her voice cutting through the laughter. Isabella turned. Her eyes narrowed behind the gold mask. She hadn't expected Harper to look this good. She had expected a broken woman in rags. Instead, Harper looked like a dark queen. Well, well, the help arrived, Isabella announced loudly. The circle quieted. I told you all she would come crawling back. I'm not crawling, Harper said. I'm here to negotiate the lease. You promised. I promised we would discuss it. Isabella smiled cruelly. But first, the apology. Get on your knees. The room went silent. Excuse me? You heard me. On your knees. Apologize for existing in my world. Isabella pointed to the stone floor. Harper stood still. I will never kneel to a bully. Isabella's face twisted. Then say goodbye to your building. I'll have the bulldozers there by morning. She turned to walk away, but as she did, she stumbled into Harper. It was a practiced move. Isabella lurched forward, and her clutch purse fell open. A heavy, diamond-encrusted bracelet spilled out, sliding across the floor to stop at Harper's feet. My bracelet! Isabella shrieked. She grabbed Harper's wrist. She stole it! I felt her hand in my purse. What? No! Harper tried to pull away. I didn't touch you. Security! Isabella screamed. This waitress is a thief! She's trying to rob me! Two burly security guards materialized instantly, grabbing Harper by the arms. The crowd gasped. Phones came out. It was the perfect frame-up. A desperate, fired waitress crashing a party to steal from the wealthy. Search her bag! Isabella commanded, her eyes gleaming with triumph. One of the guards ripped Harper's small velvet purse from her shoulder. He dumped the contents, a phone, keys, and a heavy diamond ring rolled out. Harper stared at it in horror. I've never seen that before. She must have put it there. A likely story, Isabella sneered. First the bracelet, now my engagement ring. Call the police. I want her arrested. I want her locked up. Harper struggled, panic rising in her throat. This is a lie. She invited me here. It's a setup. But no one was listening. The judgment was swift and absolute. The guards began to drag her toward the exit. The shame was suffocating. She was going to prison. The center would be destroyed. Isabella had won. Stop! The word wasn't shouted. It was spoken with a quiet, thunderous authority that made the air in the massive hall vibrate. Sebastian Alistair stepped out from the shadows of the Egyptian temple. He wasn't wearing a mask. Stop. The single word didn't just cut through the chatter of the Metropolitan Museum. It seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. It wasn't shouted, but the authority behind it was so absolute that the security guards froze mid-step, their hands still gripping Harper's arms. Sebastian Alistair stepped out from the shadows of the Temple of Dendor. He wasn't wearing a mask. While everyone else was hiding behind feathers and gold leaf, Sebastian's face was bare, his expression carved from granite. He looked like a storm making landfall. Isabella's triumphant smirk faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching nervously. Sebastian? Darling, thank God you're here. This maniac. She tried to rob me. The help has gone feral. Sebastian didn't even look at her. He walked straight toward the guards. His stride was predatory, his eyes locked on the hands holding Harper. Unhand her, Sebastian commanded, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that carried more threat than a scream. If you do not let go of her in the next 2 seconds, you will never work in this city again. I will personally ensure your names are flagged in every security firm from here to Tokyo. The guards looked at the billionaire, then at the senator's daughter, then back at the man whose net worth could buy the entire museum. They made the smart choice. They released Harper immediately, stepping back as if she were radioactive. Harper stumbled, the adrenaline leaving her legs weak. Sebastian was there instantly. He didn't grab her. He caught her. His hand slid around her waist, pulling her into his side, a solid wall of protection against the staring crowd. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice changing from steel to velvet as he looked down at her. I didn't take it, Harper whispered, her voice trembling. Sebastian. She put it there, I swear. I know, Sebastian said. He finally turned his gaze to Isabella. Isabella laughed, a high-pitched, brittle sound. Oh, Sebastian, don't be naive. She played you. She's a desperate little pauper who saw a diamond ring and couldn't help herself. It was in her bag. Yes, Sebastian said, his voice projecting to the back of the hall. It was in her bag, because you put it there exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds ago. Isabella rolled her eyes. Don't be ridiculous. I was nowhere near her bag. Sebastian reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a small, sleek remote. He turned to the crowd, addressing the hundreds of masked elites who were watching the drama with hungry eyes. You all came here for a show, Sebastian announced coldly. So let me give you one. But this isn't a performance. This is a crime. He pressed the button. The massive projection screens, which had been displaying images of starving children for the charity auction, flickered. The image changed. It was high-definition black and white footage, clearly taken from a concealed camera at a high angle. The timestamp on the screen showed, today, 8:14 p.m. The room went deathly silent. On the screen, Harper was seen speaking politely to a waiter. Behind her, Isabella Vance approached. The camera zoomed in. The resolution was crystal clear. Everyone saw Isabella look left, then right. They saw her hand slip into her own clutch, pull out the distinctive diamond ring, and slide it seamlessly into Harper's open velvet purse. They saw her signal the security guards before she even pretended to trip. It wasn't just a setup. It was a masterclass in malice. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. It started as a murmur and grew into a roar of shock and disgust. Isabella stood frozen, staring at the screen, her face drained of all color, leaving her makeup looking like a grotesque mask. "That's—" Isabella stammered, backing away. "That's fake. It's AI. He manipulated it. It's 4K footage from a private investigator I hired 3 days ago," Sebastian said, stepping toward her. The crowd parted for him, leaving Isabella isolated in the center of the floor. "I knew you were vindictive, Isabella. I knew you bought the community center just to hurt her. So I made sure I had eyes on you every second of every day." He stopped 2 feet from her. He looked at her, not with anger, but with total disdain. "You wanted to destroy her reputation," Sebastian said quietly. "Instead, you just incinerated your own." "You can't do this to me," Isabella hissed, tears of panic welling up. "My father is Senator Vance. I am a Vance." "And I am Sebastian Alistair," he countered. "And I have already sent that footage to the NYPD and the district attorney. Grand larceny, filing a false police report, and defamation. You aren't going to the after party, Isabella. You're going to central booking." As if on cue, the heavy doors of the hall swung open. 4 uniformed officers marched in. They weren't coming for the waitress. They walked straight to the woman in the gold dress. "Isabella Vance," the lead officer said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." "No, Daddy! Call my father!" Isabella screamed as they cuffed her wrists behind her back. She thrashed, her mask falling off and clattering onto the floor, revealing her tear-streaked, terrified face. As they dragged her out, kicking and screaming, the room remained paralyzed. Sebastian turned his back on her. He took off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over Harper's shoulders, shielding her from the prying eyes of the guests. "Let's get out of here," he murmured. He guided her through the crowd. This time, no one sneered. No one whispered insults. The people who had been ready to condemn Harper minutes ago now looked at her with awe and shame. Sebastian glared at a few of them, daring anyone to say a word. No one did. They walked out into the cool night air of Fifth Avenue. The silence inside the Rolls-Royce Phantom was profound, acting as a decompression chamber after the chaos. Harper slumped back into the leather seat, pulling Sebastian's jacket tighter. She smelled his cologne, cedar and rain. It made her feel safe. "You hired a private investigator?" she asked, looking at him. "I had to," Sebastian said, loosening his tie. He looked exhausted. "When I saw the foreclosure notice on the center, I knew it was her. I knew she wouldn't stop until she had completely crushed you. I couldn't let that happen. You saved me," Harper said softly. "Again." "I cleaned up my own mess," Sebastian corrected her, staring out the window at the passing city lights. "If I hadn't been so arrogant at the gala, she never would have targeted you. I put a target on your back, Harper. Tonight was just me taking it off." The car didn't turn toward her small apartment in Queens. Instead, it headed toward the highway, driving north. "Where are we going?" Harper asked after a while. "I have one more apology to make," Sebastian said mysteriously. "Trust me?" Harper looked at his profile. The sharp lines of his face had softened. The cruelty she had seen that first night was gone, replaced by a quiet, determined penitence. "I trust you," she said. And she meant it. They drove for an hour, leaving the city behind for the dark, winding roads of the Hudson Valley. The car eventually slowed, turning up a long, gravel driveway, lined with ancient oak trees. Harper's breath hitched. She knew these trees. She knew the curve of this road. The car crested the hill, and there it was. Windsor Hill. The massive stone manor stood silhouetted against the moonlit sky. It had been dark and empty for 4 years, ever since the bank seized it. But tonight, the windows were glowing with warm, golden light. The car stopped. Sebastian stepped out and opened her door. Harper stepped onto the gravel, her legs shaking. "Why are we here, Sebastian? This is cruel. I can't look at it." "Look at it, Harper," Sebastian urged gently. "It's not mine anymore. Your company sold it. Strangers live here." "No," Sebastian said. "Strangers don't live here. You do." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy iron key. He took her hand and pressed the cold metal into her palm. "I bought it back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It took some doing. The investment firm that owned it didn't want to sell. I had to pay triple the market value and liquidate my shares in the tech merger to get the cash by noon today. But it's done. The deed is on the kitchen counter. It's in your name, Harper. Free and clear. No mortgage, no debts." Harper stared at the key, then at the house, then at him. The magnitude of the gesture was overwhelming. He hadn't just bought her a gift, he had resurrected her history. You sold your shares. Millions of dollars?" Harper gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Sebastian, I can't accept this." "You can, and you will," Sebastian said firmly. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a folded document. "And this is the deed to the Hope for Youth Center. I established a blind trust to fund it. V Corp is gone. The building is yours. The kids are safe." He took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "I took everything from you, Harper. My greed destroyed your world. I can't bring your parents back. I would give my life if I could. But I can give you your home. I can give you your art back." Harper dropped the key and the paper onto the grass. She didn't care about the property. She cared about the man standing in front of her. A man who had dismantled his own ego, piece by piece, to fix what he had broken. She stepped forward and placed her hands on his chest. She could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. "You didn't have to do this to earn my forgiveness," she whispered. "I didn't do it for forgiveness," Sebastian admitted, his voice cracking. "I did it because when you danced that night, you woke me up. You showed me that I was just a ghost, haunting a boardroom. You made me want to be a man worthy of watching you." He looked down, afraid to hope. "I'll leave. The car will take you back to the city whenever you want. The house is yours. I just wanted you to know that." Harper cut him off by rising on her tiptoes. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down. "Shut up, Sebastian," she murmured. She kissed him. It wasn't tentative. It was a collision of souls. It tasted of rain and redemption, and a future that had seemed impossible an hour ago. Sebastian froze for a second. Then he groaned, wrapping his arms around her waist and lifting her off the ground, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in the universe. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the moonlight was bathing the lawn in silver. "Don't leave," Harper whispered, resting her forehead against his. "I'm not going anywhere," Sebastian promised. Harper pulled back slightly, a mischievous glint returning to her green eyes. She looked at the expansive manicured lawn of her childhood home. "You know," she said softly, "you still owe me a dance." Sebastian chuckled, a genuine warm sound that rumbled in his chest. "There's no orchestra, Harper." "Listen," she said. The wind rustled through the oak trees. The crickets were singing in the high grass. The distant hum of the world seemed to harmonize with the beating of their hearts. "There is always music," she said, "if you listen." She took his hand. She placed his other hand on her waist. "Follow me," she commanded, just as she had that night at the Pierre. But this time, it wasn't a dare. It was an invitation. Sebastian Alistair, the man who ruled empires, surrendered control. He let the waitress lead him. They moved across the moonlit grass, spinning in a slow, imperfect waltz. He stepped on her toe once. She laughed, and he laughed with her. As he dipped her back, looking down into the eyes of the woman who had brought him back to life, Sebastian knew one thing for certain. He had lost the wager that night at the gala, but he had won the only prize that mattered. He had found his partner, and he would never let her go. Wow, I still have chills. Sebastian went from the villain of the story to the ultimate hero, but it took Harper's strength to change him. It just goes to show that true redemption isn't about saying sorry. It's about fixing what you broke, no matter the cost. Harper got her home back, but more importantly, she got her dignity and a love she never expected. What was your favorite part? Was it when Harper destroyed him on the dance floor, or when Sebastian exposed Isabella at the museum? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And listen, if you enjoyed this roller coaster of emotion, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, share this video with someone who loves a happy ending, and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our next story. Until next time, keep dreaming and stay strong.